The night I found out Daniel Mercer had been lying to me, I was standing in my dead father's garage at 10:30 with a box of old invoices on my hip and a flashlight that kept cutting out every 30 seconds. 3 months. That was how long I had been holding everything together by myself. 3 months of early mornings and late nights, and smiling at customers who looked at me like they were waiting for me to fail. Then the letter came. And everything I thought I understood about the man next door went sideways, so fast I had to grab the workbench just to stay upright. Let me go back to where it actually started. My father, Roy Callahan, ran a small auto repair shop out of a converted building on the corner of his property for 22 years. Nothing fancy. For bays, a parts room that smelled like rubber and metal, a front desk he built himself out of reclaimed wood, and a reputation in town that took him longer to build than anything else he owned. When he died in February, he left me the house, the shop, and about 4 months of unpaid accounts that his bookkeeper had been too kind to chase. I was 29. I knew how to change a tire and flush a radiator. I did not know how to run a business. But I was his only family left, and the shop was the only thing he had ever been truly proud of, so I stayed. Daniel lived in the house directly behind ours, separated by a chain-link fence and a row of cedar trees my dad had planted 10 years ago for privacy. I had known him the way you know someone when your parents are the ones who actually have the relationship. He would wave from the driveway. Sometimes he helped my dad drag equipment when my dad's back was bad. He was quiet, mid-30s, worked some kind of contracting job that kept irregular hours. I did not know him well. Not even close. The first time he came to the shop after my dad passed, I thought it was just condolences. He stood at the door in a gray work jacket and said he was sorry about Roy. I thanked him. He looked around the front bay for a second, then asked if the compressor on the left side was running right because it sounded like it was cycling too fast. I told him I had no idea. He nodded and left. That was it. He came back the next morning with coffee. Not for me specifically, or at least that was not how he framed it. He said he was making a run anyway and asked if the girl at the front desk wanted anything. There was no girl at the front desk. There was just me, sitting on a parts catalog trying to decode my father's handwriting in a ledger that looked like it had been filled out during an earthquake. Daniel set a cup in front of me without a word, walked around to the compressor, listened to it for about 30 seconds, and then told me the pressure switch needed adjusting or it would burn the motor out before the month was gone. I asked him how he knew that. He shrugged. My dad had one. Same model. He fixed it in 20 minutes, did not charge me, and did not make a big deal about it. He just picked up his coffee cup when he was done, and said he would see me around. I watched him go, and I remember thinking that was either the most useful or the most suspicious thing that had happened to me all week. By April, he was there most mornings. Not hovering, not taking over. He would look at what was broken and either fix it himself or tell me what needed to happen and wait for me to decide. When a customer tried to talk down a labor quote because they thought I did not know what I was doing, Daniel was usually nearby doing something that looked unrelated. And he would stay unrelated unless I looked at him. If I looked at him, he would say the part number out loud or remind me what the last 3 jobs that model had taken in hours. Enough to back me up without stepping in front of me. I started to trust him without making a decision about it. That was the thing about Daniel. He did not ask you to trust him. He just kept showing up in a way that made not trusting him feel like the harder choice. Then Holt Industries sent its first offer. It came on a Thursday in a white envelope with a return address from a real estate development firm 2 counties over. They were interested in acquiring the property and the shop building for commercial redevelopment. The number they offered was not bad. That was the part that scared me, because a number that is not bad means they want it badly enough to be reasonable on the first pass. And a first pass that reasonable means the second one is going to have conditions attached. I called my dad's lawyer, and then I called his accountant. Both of them said roughly the same thing. The offer was legal, the land was mine, and I did not have to sell. But they said it gently. The way people say things when they want you to hear the advice buried underneath the words they are actually using. I showed Daniel the letter the next day because I did not have anyone else to show it to who would understand what it meant for a working shop and not just a property value. He read it twice, folded it carefully along the same crease it had come in, set it on the workbench. Then he looked at me and asked how much of the debt was still outstanding. I told him. He did not flinch. He asked what the shop was clearing in a good month right now. I told him that too.
He was quiet for a while.
Then he said, that offer disappears if you can show 3 clean months of operating income. Companies like this do not want to fight a profitable business. They want to pick up something that looks like it is already losing. I asked him how he knew what companies like this wanted. He said he had seen a few of them work before.
I should have pushed harder on that answer right then.
I did not. I was too tired and too relieved that someone was thinking clearly when I could not. We built a plan over the following 2 weeks. Nothing fancy. Cut the accounts that were losing money. Chase the ones that were owed. Get 3 regular fleet customers locked in on service agreements, so the monthly numbers looked stable. Fix the front of the shop, so it did not look like a place one strong wind away from closing. Daniel drove the supply runs because he knew which vendors gave real terms and which ones smiled while they buried fees in the back of the invoice. The work was hard and honest, and it started to work. By the end of May, the books looked better than they had in 2 years. I hired a part-time mechanic named Pete who my dad had trained years back and who was quietly delighted to come back. I stopped eating dinner standing over the sink and started eating it at the table again. Small things, but they added up. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, the thing between Daniel and me got harder to ignore. It was not dramatic. That is what I keep coming back to. It never announced itself. It was the way he would lean against the doorframe at the end of a long day and not say anything for a while, like the silence was comfortable enough that talking would have been the rude part. It was the way he remembered how I took my coffee and never made it a point to mention that he remembered. It was the night the parts delivery arrived 2 hours late, and I sat on the tailgate of his truck eating gas station sandwiches in the dark because neither of us wanted to say the day was finished and go back inside. I asked him once why he kept coming back. He said Roy had been a good neighbor. I said my dad had been gone for 3 months. Daniel looked out at the tree line and said some things took a while to wind down. I did not push it. I should have. But I was scared that pushing it would change the shape of whatever we had built, and I was not ready to risk that. The second offer from Holt came in June. It was higher, and this time it came with a name attached. A representative named Marcus Webb who wanted to schedule a walkthrough and discuss options in person. I told Daniel the same evening. He was quiet longer than usual when I told him. Then he asked what name was on the letter. I told him, Marcus Webb. Something moved across Daniel's face that I almost missed, because I was not looking for it. He went still for just a half second. Then he nodded and said we should get the financial records organized before any meeting. I noticed it. I filed it away. I told myself it was nothing. Marcus Webb came on a Thursday morning wearing a gray suit and shoes that were too clean for a working property. He shook my hand with both of his like he was establishing something. He walked the bays with his hands in his pockets, nodding at everything without actually looking at any of it. He talked about opportunity and community development and what a sharp businesswoman I clearly was for keeping things moving after such a loss. Every sentence was a compliment with a hook in it. Daniel was not there that morning. That was the first time since February he had not shown up. I handled it. I knew my numbers. I knew my accounts. I kept my answers short and held the folder the way Tessa holds hers in the kind of stories that end with someone walking out of a bank with what they came for. Webb left without getting anything except a promise that I would think it over. He did not look like a man who was used to thinking it over. That afternoon, I went looking for Daniel. He was at his place, working on something under the hood of an old pickup in his driveway. He heard me come through the gate and stood up, wiping his hands on a rag. His face was careful in a way it usually was not. I said, "You knew Marcus Webb was coming." He looked at the rag in his hands. Something in that tiny pause told me more than he had said in 4 months of mornings. I kept my voice flat. I said, "You know him." "Not new."
"No."
He let out a breath and leaned back against the truck. Not running from it.
"Just slow about it."
That was the Daniel thing. He did not bluster, and he did not perform innocence. He just went quiet until he had something real to say. Then he said yes. I waited. He said he had worked for the same development firm 4 years ago. Not as a buyer, as a contractor. Site assessments, property condition reports, that kind of thing. Webb had been his contact on 2 projects. When the first offer letter came to my shop and he saw the company name on it, he recognized it. He knew what their pattern looked like. He knew they flagged distressed properties and moved fast if the owner was inexperienced or financially thin enough to pressure. I stared at him. The cedar trees were perfectly still behind him. I said, "So when you came back with coffee that second morning, you already knew who had sent the letter?"
Not yet.
He shook his head. The first letter came after I had already been coming around. I did not make the connection until you showed it to me. Why didn't you tell me then?
He looked up at me.
Because I was afraid you would think everything I had done was about the property and not about you. That was the sentence I had not been ready for. It landed differently than I expected. Not like a justification. More like the thing that costs you something to say out loud. I walked back through the gate without answering him. Not because I was done. Because I needed to think before I said something I could not take back. I spent 2 days going over everything in my head. Every morning, he had shown up. Every problem he had helped me solve. Every quiet evening at the end of a long day where neither of us said much, but the space between us had been full of something I had not named yet. I kept looking for the place where it turned selfish, where his help became manipulation, where the kindness had an angle underneath it. I could not find it, and believe me, I looked. What I found instead was this. He had shown up before he made the connection. He had helped me build something real before the second offer came. When Webb showed up, Daniel had stepped back, not forward. He had let me handle it on my own instead of inserting himself like a man trying to control the outcome. He had known more than me, and he had used what he knew to protect me, not to position himself. But he had not told me the truth. That part was still sitting in the middle of everything like a stone I kept stubbing my toe on in the dark. On the third day, I went back through the gate. He was inside. The light in his kitchen was on, and I could see him at the table with papers spread out in front of him. I knocked, and he answered fast, like he had been waiting even though he had no reason to expect me. He held the door open without a word. I sat down at his kitchen table. He sat across from me. There was coffee on the counter, but neither of us moved toward it. I said, "I need to know if there's anything else." He did not pretend to misunderstand. He said no. That was the whole of it.
He knew the company.
He should have told me when he made the connection. He had no stake in the property and no deal with Webb or anyone connected to him. He said it plainly, the way someone says a thing when they are done carrying it and just want to put it on the table between 2 people and let it be what it is. I said, "You made me feel like I could trust you."
He said yes.
I said that trust is harder to build than a fence line and easier to pull down. He nodded once. I know that. I looked at the papers on his table. Receipts from the parts vendor. A copy of my fleet service agreements that he must have been reviewing. The handwriting in the margin was his. Numbers, notes, the same careful shorthand he used when he was thinking through a problem. He had not stopped working on it even when he thought I was done with him. I sat with that for a minute. Then I said, "The next time you know something I need to know, you tell me. First." He held my gaze.
Yes.
"No side decisions about what I can handle," I said. "You don't get to protect me from information that's mine to have." He said he understood. And the thing was, I believed him. Not because I wanted to, because I knew by then how he moved through things, and this was not a man who made the same mistake twice. I picked up the copy of the fleet agreement and asked him what he had found in the margin notes. We went back to work. The third offer from Holt came with a deadline attached. Webb sent it by certified mail with a cover letter that was friendly in the way a smile can be friendly while the hand behind the back is doing something else. The offer was the highest yet. The deadline was 30 days. And buried near the bottom of the letter was a note about zoning variance applications that had recently been submitted to the county office for the surrounding parcels. Daniel read that line twice without commenting. I asked what it meant. He said if the zoning change went through, the shop's commercial classification might shift. It would not put me out of business legally, but it would change what I could do with the building and make my fleet customers nervous about long-term contracts. It was pressure without being a threat. The kind of move that cost you nothing if the person sold anyway, but made staying a lot harder if they tried to fight it. I asked how long the variance process took. 6 weeks minimum, he said. 8 if anyone filed an objection. I looked at him. Anyone can file? He nodded slowly, like he had already thought about the next sentence before I caught up to it. I said, "Does a neighboring property owner qualify as an objecting party?" "Yes," he said. "They do." He filed the objection the next morning. His own name, his own address, his own property behind the cedar trees. He had standing because his land shared a survey boundary with the corner lot where the shop sat. He did not ask me if he should. He called and told me after. The difference mattered. He was not asking permission, and he was not taking over. He was doing a thing that was his to do, and he let me know so there were no more hidden moves between us. The variance process stalled. Webb called me once and left a message that was professional and cool and not happy. I did not call back. My lawyer sent a letter. Their lawyers sent a letter back. And for 6 more weeks, Holt Industries had nowhere to move. In the meantime, we finished the quarter. 3 clean months of real income. A fleet contract with a landscaping company that ran 14 trucks. A deal with a small delivery outfit that needed routine maintenance on a schedule. Pete working 4 days a week and asking about full-time. The front of the shop with a new sign my dad would have pretended not to care about and then looked at every single morning on his way in. The day I deposited the 3rd consecutive profitable month, I came back to the shop and found Daniel in the back bay replacing the seal on a brake caliper for a customer who had come in without an appointment. He did not work at the shop. He had never taken a dime from me. He just kept showing up the way he always had, and I had stopped trying to find the right category for it. I stood in the bay door and watched him for a second. He had grease on his forearm, and his jaw was set in that focused way he got when the job required patience. I said, "Holt pulled the 4th offer this morning. Their lawyer sent a withdrawal notice." Daniel looked up from the caliper. He did not celebrate. He just looked at me the way you look at someone when the hard thing is finally done, and you have been standing beside them the whole time it took to get there. Then he said, "Good." I said, "I want to say something, and I need you to let me finish it." He set the tool down and gave me his full attention. That was the thing about Daniel. When you needed him to listen, he was the best listener in any room. I said, "You hid something from me. I know why you hid it, and I understand it better now than I did 3 days after I found out. But I am not someone who pretends things did not happen because it is easier. You know that about me by now." He nodded. I said, "So I need you to know that I see the whole thing. The part you got wrong, and the part you got right. And the part you got right is most of it. I know the difference." Daniel looked at me for a long second. Then he said, "I know you do. That is one of the things about you that makes me show up every morning." I looked away first because I always did when he said something that got too close to the real thing. Then I looked back because looking away had gotten old. I said, "The shop is keeping. So is the morning coffee arrangement." He picked the tool back up. "Fair enough." I said, "And next time you know something, you tell me first." He did not hesitate even a little. "First. Always." I walked back to the front desk and sat down with the stack of the day's work in front of me. The compressor on the left side was running smooth. The fleet schedule on the wall was full. Pete was in Bay 2 humming something I did not recognize. Outside, the sign my dad would have looked at every morning caught the afternoon light at exactly the angle that made the lettering sharp. I had not come back here for the money. I had not come back because I had a plan, or because I knew what I was doing, or because anyone told me I could make it hold. I came back because it was his, and I was his, and some things are worth fighting for before you know for certain whether you can win. Daniel had known that about this place before I said it out loud. Maybe that was what I kept trying to figure out in those 2 days when I was going over everything and looking for where his help had an angle in it. The truth was simpler than any of the stories I had built around it. He had seen what the shop meant before I did. And he had shown up because of that. Because of Roy, yes. But also because of me. And because some people recognize the thing worth standing next to long before the person standing next to them does. The cedar trees between our properties stayed where they were. But I stopped thinking of them as the line between his side and mine. Some fences are just trees. And some neighbors are just the person your life needed before you knew you needed them. The screwdriver I borrowed in the story down the road was trust. The question was whether I was going to put it back or let him keep it. I think by then, you already know the answer.
Drop a comment.
Would you have walked back through the gate? And would you have let him keep showing up after? Because that is the thing nobody tells you about the people who help you hold something together when it is close to falling. Sometimes the hardest part is not deciding whether to trust them again. It is admitting that, even when you found the one thing they got wrong, you already knew the weight of everything they got right. And that weight does not disappear, just because the truth took 3 extra days to get to you. The morning after the withdrawal letter came, Daniel showed up at 7. Same gray jacket. 2 coffees. He set mine on the front desk without a word and went around to the left bay to check the compressor like he always did. It was running fine. He knew it would be. He checked it anyway. That was how we kept going. That was how the shop kept going. And honestly, that was enough.